Pardon me. Good morning, folks. Welcome to the Rangers Reviews morning briefing on Thursday, the 27th of October. I'm Joshua Barrie, joined by Derek Clark, or Derek in Naples, as it says on the name tag. Derek, the night after Rangers 3-0 defeat against Napoli in the Champions League, not the worst game that they've had in the group stage by far, but I think the very fact that that is kind of the most positive outlook on the result tells a story and paints a picture of the entire campaign and just how uninspiring it's been, Derek, from the highs of last season's European fun. I'll just come straight to you on what you thought of the game, what the manager said after, and how you think kind of generally Rangers can look back on it, as I say, in the context of this group stage.
Yeah, it was a bit of a chasing, to be honest with you, Joshua. When Simeone scores the first and then scores the second in quick succession, you're fearing the worst. However, they sort of weathered the storm somewhat. It got to half time, and in the second half, it's clear that Napoli took their foot off the gas. They had chances. Remember that they struck the bar. Alan McGregor made a couple of saves as well. So it could have been more emphatic than what it was. 3-0, another goal from a set piece. Rangers really haven't sorted that out for some time now. It's too easy. John Lundstrom loses his man, and I think the old adage, putting men on the posts, is ringing true once again this morning. But listen, Rangers, I thought the second half, it was much as they can do. That they offered a bit more in an attacking sense. Morelos, of course, has to score with the ball from Ridwan across goal. I thought Ridwan was the real shining light in the game. I think I was pleased to see him in the starting lineup and get a chance, and I thought he did pretty well. As Jamie Brown says, that he's spot on. They were toying with Rangers. I mean, this was he made a number of changes. Spalletti, thank God he never had that front three that started in Roman Sunday, because Rangers would have been really up against it if they were facing those three. However, it just shows you the strength and depth that they've got, the likes of Simeone in there, and they can call in other players like Politano, who's a class act as well. I think they'll go far in the competition, Joshua. They're a top side, and it's going to take a really good team to stop them. So a 3-0 defeat, I think I would have bit your hand off for that at the start of the game. So all things considered, take the 3-0 defeat, head back up the road. It's been a really disappointing campaign. From the highs of Eindhoven, you're thinking, this is Rangers back in the big time. The group was a really tasty group. There's no doubt about it. Well, Napoli are third seeds. Ajax were top seeds, which shows you just how competitive it was. But Rangers just haven't been competitive in it. And I think a lot of supporters just want to see the back of it now.
Yeah, lots of comments coming in, so we'll try to get through as many of them as possible. I tend to agree with you, Derek. I think Van Bronckhorst's interviews after the game, in which he was keen to focus on the positives of the second half, hold some weight. But when you consider the number of changes that Napoli made in the game, it did swing slightly back in Rangers' favour. Morelos obviously should score that open goal, which he doesn't even connect with, to make it 2-1, which changes the complexion. But equally, you're an inch away from that shot from Ndombele going under the crossbar and it being 3-0 and Rangers conceding 3 goals in quick succession, completely like the game against Ajax. And then the second half is perhaps just an episode in damage limitation. And I agree with you from the highs of Eindhoven, but also from it's so difficult for Van Bronckhorst to, the level of these teams is so high. You look at the fact that Ajax only have 3 points, and then the level of opponent Rangers have had to face in the Champions League is higher than the Europa League. But something I put in my piece this morning was, if that argument, if it was gospel, if it couldn't be challenged, then Rangers' European run last season would have ended in Dortmund. This side, having seemed so limitless in Europe last season, seemed to lack a clear identity to me in Europe this season. Do you think that's fair, Derek? Because I think there certainly seems to be a reluctance to look at positives when Rangers have conceded 19 goals, lost 5 games out of 5 and scored just 1.
Yeah, and I seen a comment last night which is the feeling amongst many, saying that they were watching Rangers and they just felt nothing. They were just watching the match unfold and they had no emotion towards the game. It's been sucked out of them, which is a bad state of affairs. But I can understand where they're coming from. It certainly looks like a team that, well, it is a team that's at the end of its cycle. It needs refresh. We all know that. In terms of Van Bronckhorst, what he said afterwards, he did mention that the likes of Barcelona can't even get in the Champions League. So it shows you just how competitive and well, it says that they find it tough and when they play in the Champions League. So it shows you how competitive the competition is, and Rangers really have done well to even dine at the top table. But that's not enough. They just want to see the team be competitive, and last night was another one of those performances where you just felt that Napoli could have upped the gears at any point, and it could have got ugly. But I mean, like I say, a 3-0 defeat. It shows you how well, we're going to see how far we've come, that we're saying that's actually an acceptable scoreline, and you're quite pleased to come away with that, just a 3-0 loss. So it's been really disappointing. I don't know why. I mean, last season you'd have went into these games full of confidence, and you may have lost the games, but you certainly would have put up a right good fight, and the teams would have known they've been playing against Rangers. Whereas this season, getting into the Champions League, it's been a bit of a hiding, to be honest. That being said, it's quite bizarre. I mean, Rangers go into the last game and they do technically have something to play for. I mean, if they have a Sturm Graz-esque performance, they could qualify for the Europa League, as unlikely as that may seem. But yeah, after the Ajax game, you would never think that they would not pick up a point after that. But Napoli and Liverpool, of course, their classes shone through in the end, and quite rightly they qualify for the next round. But yeah, listen, Giovanni Van Bronckhorst has his own problems to seek. Aberdeen is huge at the weekend. He has to win round the supporters. Many of them, as I mentioned, have lost trust in him. And I can understand why, as I mentioned there. A lot of fans, now actually, a fan messaged me last night. He actually was in the ground. They said he left at half time because he feared the pasting and he wasn't enjoying it. And a lot of supporters are telling me now that it's not enjoyable. They're just going because it's Rangers and you go. But if they can leave early, they can do, which is not a good sign.
Yeah, a comment here from Andrew Webster, Derek, that says, can you explain the serious lack of intensity? Imagine in particular referring to the concession of the first couple of goals. Rangers seem to me caught kind of in between. They wanted to be aggressive, and Van Bronckhorst said, I think in the press conference before the game, Derek, that if Rangers were to go in and just defend, and they would be waiting for the damage to be done. They played with a relatively high line for travelling away from home. And they didn't, man mark in the way that we've seen them do at home. But to me, it looked like sometimes caught in between those two, they weren't really compact and hard to play through. But equally, they weren't really aggressive and going man for man. How did that look in the stadium? And do you feel complaints at a lack of intensity against the ball is fair?
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment. They're chasing shadows for much, especially the first half for sure. And Napoli were just bypassing the Rangers midfield with ease. And Politano, as I mentioned, was giving Yilmaz a hard time. But Ridvan was the one player who was trying to break the lines. There was one moment in the first half where he did do so. He played the ball to James Sands and then he knocked it back towards the centre backs, and he was absolutely raging with the American for doing so, and he was frustrated on a number of occasions. Yilmaz looked down on the pitch, and I think he was frustrated with the lack of intensity as well. So I'm not too sure if the message towards the players is getting through, and they understand exactly what their role is, what they have to do. That being said, I mean, they did get through it just at the end of the first half, didn't they? I mean, I'm not even going to call them half chances, balls into the box to no one, but at least they were progressing up the pitch. Morelos, of course, has that opportunity. The defender does well, to be fair, but he has a chance. But yeah, I think there's a serious questions. You hear a lot of supporters saying that they're concerned with the fitness of the players, with the work rate. And I think that's understandable. I seen a stat last night when I done the reaction video. Someone said that Napoli ran 4 kilometres more than Rangers in the game. You see this quite a lot now. Teams are putting in the hard yards and putting in more coverage than what Rangers are. So it begs the question: what is the plan? Where is that intensity gone that we've seen last season, particularly in Europe, of course? So yeah, these are fair questions to be raised. Napoli, we need to give them credit at the end of the day. This is a top side, flying high in Serie A. They're going to go far in this competition. I think they're going to. I think they're favourites to win the league, to be honest, as well, the way they're playing at the moment. So Rangers were up against it tonight. So there is a massive gulf in quality, but this intensity thing is something that we've seen against Livingston and Dundee recently as well, and against other teams domestically. So against Aberdeen, you're concerned because you know that's their cup final against Rangers. They always seem to raise their game against them. So the intensity has to come from somewhere ahead of the weekend, or else Rangers could be in for another long afternoon.
Yeah, and I guess that's important context, isn't it? Because it's not as if of these 5 games, how many moments have Rangers had? Only really one when Scott Arfield opened to scoring at home to Liverpool. How many games have they looked truly competitive in, or has a result seemed realistic beyond the first, 20, 30 minutes of the game against the first half against Napoli as well? Has to be considered with one more game at home to come. But it's all about the wider picture for me, Derek. People are struggling to see domestically how Rangers' style of play can bring success at the end of the season at the moment. You don't need to go far back, just the weekend's draw against Livingston as proof that it hasn't not only been great to watch, but it seems as though perhaps performances have caught up slightly with results. Obviously, the Dundee game as well, which saw the team booed off after the game. So it is all context. If Rangers were flying high in the league, they'd perhaps given a better account of themselves in the Champions League, and there'd been a more, cohesive response over the 5 games. It's not so much chopping and changing and a struggle to see what the real identity is. Then you can use the argument that this is a difficult level of opposition, etc., etc. But I think when people perhaps aren't seeing what they want, regardless of from their team, that's when it becomes a bit difficult to use the argument that Van Bronckhorst has, I think, after every match now in the Champions League.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I was saying, that I think a lot of supporters just want to see the back of this European campaign and focus on the league. They've got a number of, just a series of matches now, I think, until the World Cup break, a time to reset, refresh. They need to refresh this, particularly in midfield, where they're running on empty. James Sands, of course, came in last night and played alongside John Lundstrom, but Rangers need bodies in there and players that can come in and start games and improve that first team. As CGM55 points out, that is a damning statistic, isn't it? I mean, it's top sides Rangers are playing against, but you're not telling me if Rangers were in this group last season that they would concede as many goals as that. It's staggering, the drop off from last season to this. It really is. I'm not too sure if it's a hangover as well. You need to remember it's quite a big emotional undertaking, getting to a Europa League final and losing it in such a way. It's going to take a lot of the players mentally. And I know people will say, well, Eindhoven, but that's, in the main, I think if the Rangers players haven't reached the heights, it's clear they haven't reached the heights of last season. I think that's going to be, I hope it's not a one-off, but it usually is once in a lifetime sort of stuff, that journey to Seville. But they need to improve if they're going to get in. He was asked this at the press conference, Van Bronckhorst, gets into the Champions League next season. What has he learned from the previous 5 games? And he says, well, there's a long way to go in the league, but they do need to improve to compete with these top sides, because the gap at the moment is just is huge, and it's not just Rangers, of course. Likes of Celtic and Hearts are in the European competition as well. I found it tough going, so it's going to be tough for them to compete at this level. But it's been that's what it's got to take. Bit of investment, and as I mentioned, come January time, Rangers do need to find quality if they want to guarantee that Champions League spot next season. They need players to come in and really help this squad, because it's at the end of its cycle. This player's been asked to go to the well too many times. Leon King, you mentioned last night as well, loved his 50-50 challenge, and that's the sort of bite and grit that you're wanting from this Rangers side, and many felt maybe he picked up an injury from that, but it was just cramped, we were told. But Van Bronckhorst did say he's only 18 years of age, and he's practically been told to play every minute of every game at the moment, so that tells you where you are in a defensive sense, given the injuries and what have you. So there's a feeling of sympathy, you could say, for Van Bronckhorst, based on the fact that there's so many big players out at the moment that you would normally rely upon and call upon. But it's up to the coach to. That's why he's paid the big money to get a team on the park and riding this storm. And at the moment, he's finding it heavy weather, so it doesn't get any easier at the weekend. He has to get a result against Aberdeen. As I mentioned, a lot of fans have lost faith in him. It's going to take. He's just got to basically start winning games to win them round. And even still, I think that the style of football has to improve massively for fans to get back on side again. That's a big thing for me, Joshua. But like I said, fans are turning off now, and they're leaving games early, as I mentioned, half-time, which was unthinkable last season, especially in Europe. So, yeah, improvement needed across a number of areas.
Yeah, it's a great point you make about how would this team have fared in the Champions League last season. I certainly don't think that they would have conceded goals in quick succession as they have done. And that, again, feeds into or gives some more context as to why there is so much frustration, because if you're not progressing season upon season, yes, you lose important players in Calvin Bassey and Joe Rebo, who were so important for Rangers in Europe and European competition last season. But as you say, when the squad is where it is, when you have a number of players out of contract next summer, I think in the home leg against Napoli, it was 7 of the starting players are out of contract next summer. Obviously, Morelos and Kent are the headline ones from that. And then I think in many ways they look at back to their performance against Dortmund, as we spoke about yesterday. In either leg, they kind of epitomise how Rangers look now compared to how Rangers look then. We'll speak about Morelos before the end of the show, Derek, but I wanted to get your thoughts on Ridvan Yilmaz, who was handed his 5th start of his Rangers career, his first in the Champions League, and not an easy opponent or direct opponent in Politano for the young left back to face, but I thought he did well. And in possession, I guess that's the big point of his game that people have picked out compared to Barisic. He's perhaps more suited to playing those passes deep in the pitch and not quite as cross-heavy a fullback as we know Barisic is. Was he your standout at that left back position, and is it his going forward, or do you think Barisic comes back in the league at the weekend?
It's a tough one. Barisic in the main for me has been a steady Eddie this season. I mean, he has had some howlers, but in the main, it's not been the main reason why Rangers have been so poor this season. That being said, I'd like to see more of Ridvan. I was pleased to see him in the starting lineup. Van Bronckhorst did tell me he was going to make changes, and he was one of them. And I thought after a tough start, I think Politano had him on toast a couple of times, and his defensive side of things, he looked a little bit out of place, but I felt he grew into the game. Like you say, I think breaking the lines, going forward, he offers Rangers something a little bit different. His ball across the face of goal for Morelos for the tap-in was sensational. How he's missed that, I've no idea. But he offers Rangers that something different, and I think I would certainly like to see him against Aberdeen. I know people will say, the physicality Scottish football is not the Champions League, and Aberdeen will look to target him. But listen, Rangers know all about his physicality and his height and what have you. He's good on the ball. Rangers are going to have most of the ball, you'd imagine, at the weekend, and I think he could be the man to break those lines, to beat the Aberdeen defensive structure and get the ball flashing across the face of goal. Hopefully, you'd imagine, I think it's highly likely that Antonio Cholak will come back into the side. So, I'd be inclined to start him. on Wednesday at the weekend. There was I know someone suggested that last night, and I've said it before as well, why not play him in Ryan Kent's position? I'm not. Yeah, I know you're a big fan of that, Joshua.
He's a left back. He's a left back. Why would you play a left back at left winger? It's the same argument with James Tavernier or Alexander Arnold down south. I think the positions he picks up, it's just a completely different role. For me, the reason he should play at left back over Barisic is, I agree with you. I don't think Barisic, in some ways, he has been relatively steady. But when he gets the ball, I think Motherwell away is the perfect game for me to kind of sum it up. His pass completion was 65% or something. You look at Redvan last night, when he doesn't have a passing option, he has the ability to beat his man or go inside the pitch and just open it up instead of losing the ball, which is a problem enough for Rangers without when the ball goes to fullback. I think Barisic just loses it too regularly, in my opinion. And I think he's suited to that Gerrard style of football where he gets the ball in the final third, it isolates obviously his best attribute, which is his crossing, and he's probably the best crosser in the league. He's obviously a Croatian international, a player of so much quality. But for for how he's playing his fullbacks, I think you saw last night, as you did in the cup in midweek, what Redvan can bring. But we'll see if they both start at the weekend. I've seen some suggestions that Barisic may have to play centre back, but as you've said, Derek, in the press conference after, it was Leon King just suffered from cramp. Speak about a few more players before we finish up. I thought Sakala did relatively well in the second half compared to Scott Wright, who I think struggled in the first half. We're going to have an analysis piece later today looking at both the first goals and the second one in particular. I think Rangers just too slow to close down a cross, especially when you've got that space available to attack in behind. But the right wing, just like Matondo coming off the bench at the weekend, this time it's Sakala, the lack of continuity continues to maybe not surprise me because it's been going on for a while, but I don't see how it can be a positive. Get your thoughts on that, Derek, and then maybe as well Alfredo Morelos and what you thought of his kind of performance overall.
Yeah, I thought Sakala was better than Scott Wright, who I thought was anonymous in the first half. Just looked out his depth at times, but to be fair, Napoli were well up for it and they were putting Rangers under the cosh for much of it. So I wasn't surprised to see him hooked at half-time. Sakala, I think probably at this moment in time is Rangers' best option out there. He had a chance near the end of the game where he had a positive run forward, beat his man. But then, as we know, his final product often lets him down, and I'm not entirely sure you can call it a shot, but he just fluffed his lines when he was in the penalty area. But at the moment, I think he is. It's his shirt to lose. Rabbi Matondo not being impressed despite a really impressive pre-season. He hasn't turned up any trees, and he's another one that looks like he's going to take some time to get accustomed to play for Rangers. For me, I know I've said it before, they haven't had a right midfield, right wing replacement since Daniel Candeias left. And I know he had his faults himself, but him and Tavernier linked up well together on that right-hand side. And there's not been that continuity there since he departed, 5 years ago now. So Rangers need to, that's another area of the pitch where they need to improve. I think central midfield is the key issue for me, where they need to add reinforcements. But the right midfield, right wing position has been problematic for years now. And yeah, it's Rangers get squad players. There's Wright and Matondo are squad players. Sakala likewise. Hadji, of course, you hope will come back and provide that option out there. But he's another one. You're not going to see him until January at the earliest, and then even still, he's going to have to play a number of games before he gets up to speed. But yeah, it's certainly been a problematic position. Alfredo Morelos has been calls, of course, for him to play out in that right-hand side. I don't think we're going to see that at any point soon. His performance last night, I think, for me, first half he was chasing lost causes. He was winning fouls, feeding on scraps, and I thought he did okay. I thought maybe he could have taken his shot in the first half maybe a bit better, but I know he's getting a bit of a hard time at the moment, and there's no doubt about it. He's not been the same player that we all know he can be. I'm not entirely sure what the root cause of that is, whether it's just form, whether it's a mental issue. Of course, you said he's out of contract at the end of the season, whether he's one of the players that's emotionally checked out. Who knows? But I expect Čolak to come in at the weekend. You're right. Yeah, he does have no pace, but that's what I'm saying. Rangers do need to address that right wing position at some point. And yeah, that's it. When the January window opens up, you'd hope that the club can go out and try and find an able body in there. But yeah, Morelos. Listen, I know Van Bronckhorst was asked whether he would play Morelos and Čolak together. I doubt we're going to see that at the weekend or going forward. I think Čolak comes back in and expect him to play against Ajax as well, to be honest. So it's up to Morelos to take his chances whenever they come about. He didn't take his chance against Dundee, of course, in a cup game at Ibrox. And I thought he wasn't the worst player last night. I think he probably faded out the game, of course, but listen, if he puts that ball in the back of the net, we're talking about a different Alfredo Morelos, but it sums up his season so far, doesn't it? Where he's been so far off what the levels expected of him.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, Derek, I'm going to leave it there so you can check out of your Airbnb and do what else you need to do before heading. Are you heading home today to the Midlands?
Yeah, no, not the Midlands. No, I'm Mallorca bound this afternoon, and I've got 5 hours in Mallorca. So I need to get the Factor 50 applied. Hopefully, just head out, see the sights at Palma, and then I get a flight up to Liverpool later on tonight. I won't get in the house till after 1 in the morning. So yeah, a long day for me. That's the thing with these Rangers trips. You know all about it, Joshua. It's the coming home. You just want to get back to your bed, but it's usually a long drawn out case. What game was it? Was it the Eindhoven game? You were stuck in London for a number of hours, or what have you?
Yeah, 14 hours in Stansted, which wasn't fun.
Wow.
But, I'd take 5 hours in Palma over that any day of the week.
Yeah,
but,
it's not the worst. So yeah, you're heading back. Should be back early hours of tomorrow morning, and then back up and at them tomorrow for Friday. Looking ahead to Aberdeen. The joys of covering Rangers, Joshua.
Absolutely, of course, we'll have all the coverage. Looking back on this game over on the website, you can subscribe at the ticker below for just £1 for 2 months and support us as well by subscribing on YouTube, hitting the like button. Thanks very much to everyone who's joined us. Safe trip home to Derek, and we'll speak to you